paid good money to see this movie. When they go out to a theater, they want cold sodas, hot popcorn, and no monsters in the projection booth.
Everyone pretend podcasting isn't boring.
Turn it off. Turn it off.
Hey folks, welcome to a special episode of The Projection Booth. On this episode, I am talking with Chuck Pfarrer all about his career, all the way from Navy SEALs up to his latest work. Had a fantastic time talking with Mr. Pfarrer, and I hope that you enjoy it as much as I do. Enjoy this interview. How did you get your start in writing?
I always liked it, but as a kid, my uncle was a novelist who got terrific reviews and lived in a wood stove heated cabin in Vermont before that was cool. He wasn't making any money doing it, but he'd have great reviews, and I'd always loved it. But I wasn't an English major because I didn't think I could eat it. I was actually a clinical psychology major, and I enjoyed writing. I wrote well. I did well in psychology, and I dropped out of graduate school, and I joined the SEALs. And while I was during my internship in graduate school, I met a guy who'd come to LA to be a screenwriter. And we wrote a screenplay. Nothing happened with it. I joined the SEALs, and I come back from Honduras one time, and he calls me up. He goes, "Remember that crappy screenplay we wrote?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "I just got into NYU because of it. It got nominated for a Focus Award, and we both have a William Morris agent." And that's what I said. Wow. So we wrote another one while I was in, and it sold. And I was the only naval officer in the world with a William Morris agent. It didn't get made, but it got optioned 3 or 4 times. And then I got out of the Navy. I was going to be a psychiatrist. Strangely, I thought, I'll write another screenplay to help pay for medical school. And damn if I didn't, and damn if it didn't sell. But then I spent the next 20 years in Hollywood.
What were those early screenplays like?
The first one was about a guy who breaks out of prison and winds up as a counselor at a summer camp for intellectually challenged adults. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest in reverse. And then the second one we wrote was based on a true story. At the beginning of World War I, Ernest Hemingway was married to this beautiful woman, Martha Gellhorn. He was drinking a lot, fishing a lot, and World War II started, and she basically said, "The real world is in Europe. I'm going to cover the war." And he stayed in Havana, but somehow, incredibly, he prevailed upon the U.S. government to give him depth charges and torpedoes. He put them on his yacht, and he said, "I'm going to hunt U-boats in the Caribbean." And we wrote a story about that crazy summer that he did. And it got optioned 2 or 3 times, but it never went there.
How long were you in the Navy?
8 years, and then I did 12 years in the reserves. Yeah, it was fun. That was odd. I look back on it now. I think that actually, in hindsight, that actually got me meetings, I think, in Los Angeles, because I didn't go to film school. I was just this guy. You're not going to believe this guy who was a SEAL. And back then, nobody knew who SEALs were. It was just completely different.
No, I think your movie is what really helped change that.
It did. Yeah. Boy, that was my first movie, and I watched the script get driven right over the cliff. There wasn't anything I could do about it either. I didn't like the movie. I didn't like the way it came out, but what can I do? You know.
Is it true that you wrote one of the early drafts of Sudden Impact?
No. That's in the Wikipedia thing. I've never bothered to. I don't know how or why people think that. But I knew Charlie back then. Maybe Charlie thinks I did. I don't know. I actually like Charlie, believe it. I like him.
I like his introduction in Navy SEALs where he's waking up on the beach, and I'm just like, I wonder how many times this has happened to him in real life.
Yeah, exactly. With somebody's shoe stuck in his shirt. Yeah. Oh, God.
Tell me, how did you build that career once you decided to do that full time?
What's crazy, I look back on it now and it's, what were you thinking? So I went out to LA, and Navy SEALs getting a green light is a really crazy thing. And I never knew that this thing might just collapse at any time, but Ryan, they were going to do it. So it led my life thinking they were going to do it, and did a couple of rewrites. And then I wound up meeting Sam Raimi and Rob Tapper, and they had just come out, the Michigan boys, of course, they just came out to Hollywood riding the coattails of Evil Dead, and we all got together. I really liked them. We just got to Hollywood. We didn't know what to make of it. We didn't really like anybody, but we all worked pretty well together, and banged out Darkman, and I was on it, and then I'd go away and I'd come back, and the Coen brothers worked on it, and Ivan Raimi worked on it, and we just all, when the writing credits came in, I liked Sam and Rob so much, I didn't even fight the credits. I was like, who cares? But work with Sam, he's just a wonderful guy. Made a hell of a movie, and I worked less on that one than I normally do because the Navy SEALs got going. I went over to Spain to make that. I'm lucky because I got to go on most of my movies. I got to go to the set. So for one reason or another. So I was lucky that way. But some of them come out good. Some of them you like, some of them you hate. That's just the way it is.
I'm a big fan of Darkman, and I especially love looking at that and then seeing what Sam did with Spider-Man and just seeing so many of the seeds being planted in Darkman.
Yeah, that was really fun. And it was really great to work with him. We did the work incrementally. Normally I'd go away and write the whole thing and come back, but it was always good to kick it around with Sam and go to his place, or to live in Silver Lake, I think. I'd drive over there, and yeah, he's just great. Just so down to earth. There's 10 good people in Hollywood, and he's 3 of them.
How did that one kind of shape up? You talked about how it changed over the time. What were your early drafts like versus what came out to the theaters?
They're pretty much the same. It was like we built the house, put the carpet and the drapes in there, and we moved the furniture around a little bit. So it pretty much came out. When Sam first pitched it to me, he said, I want to do this thing where this actor gets wrong and then takes it out. And I'm not the greatest guy in the world. I'm lucky Sam listened to me, but I thought, people don't like actors. When you go to the movies and see a guy as an actor, you think, why don't you get a job? And so I said, let's make him a scientist. And he has all these masks. Let's say he was working on liquid skin. And then so that snowballed, and I took that away for a couple of weeks, worked on it. And I wasn't afraid I normally don't show pages, but I did with Sam. It was great. He'd go through it and we'd talk about something, and that working with him was just, working with John Woo as well. I can strap into a hierarchical structure. I get it. Someone's in charge. I'm not. I get it. But if you've got guys that are really confident as directors, they're not, I was a couple of clowns that was like, God, whose side are you on, buddy? Because you're not even on your own side. That goes with it. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
So was it pretty much a natural that you would go on to work on Hard Target, since that was one of Sam's next projects as well?
Yeah, I did a couple of things for Rob and Sam. We just got on so well. And I had a deal over at Universal for a while, which is, here's Hollywood for you. I got a 3-picture deal at Hollywood and at Universal. I'm over there 3 years. I write 3 #1 movies for them, and they don't pick me up for the next year. So I'm moving out of the bungalow going, what should I wash people's cars? What more could I have done for you? So you just don't take it personally. I never took it personally. You can't understand it.
So what was that process like, working on Hard Target and updating The Most Dangerous Game?
I came up with the idea and I wrote it on spec. And I really wanted Armand Assante to be in it. And I sent it in, and Jim Jacks was our producer. And I'd written previously for Jim, I'd written a ninja movie called Shinobi, and everybody loved it. But there was another project and which didn't get going. But Jax called it what did he call it? An in the park triple. Said, we're not going to make this. But after I turned on Hard Target, he said, and Jim was a very complex guy. So he would say something to you, but he didn't necessarily mean it. He might say you're your friend, but the way he behaved with friends and enemies was about the same. But I wound up with a 3-picture deal. And so Rob and Sam were producing that. And there was this really odd thing going on with John Woo. They didn't seem to trust him. They sent me a couple of his movies and I watched them. I said, God, yeah, let's have this guy do it. Are you out of your mind? Of course. And so that was the first yes. And then they said, we want Jean-Claude to do it. And I actually, Rob and Sam and I go back with Jean-Claude, back when he was driving a limo. We all knew him. So the JCVD stuff never went to me because I was like, dude, I knew you in the day. Anyway, but Jean-Claude had mushroomed by them. And it was a Jean-Claude Van Damme movie. And it was a good one. So everyone's happy. Although I saw the rough cut and it was so violent, I was just like, when you watch a cut and the music's not in it yet, and you're just like, but I love John Woo. God, just an amazing guy. And working on the set was absolutely unique because John didn't like to talk to the actors. So John would call me over after a take and go, Chuck, tell him to do this or that. Or, like I said, imagine some other director telling the writer to talk to the actor. No, nobody would do that. But John did. I wasn't cutting his groove. You get the next take if it wasn't the way he liked it, then I'd make sure he was happy. And that's all he could do. Marvelous man. Marvelous, gentle, kind. Here's a story. All through the movie, John is saying to me, he always said, Chuck, I'm going to put you in a movie. I'm like, okay, John, And at one point he said, okay, you're going to play the dead guy at the beginning. And I thought, okay, John. And I thought I'd just be a chalk mark, like on the streets of New Orleans, because you never, right. So John has me rewrite the beginning of the movie with the hunting of the original victim, which goes on for, I don't know. It was 10 days of shooting. And it was me getting the shit kicked out of me. I did all of my own stunts. Anyway, about 4 days into that, we're shooting it at night and we're coming back into New Orleans. I'm sitting in the back seat, John's in the front in the passenger seat. And I've been getting run over by motorcycles, blown up, thrown out, everything. And John's smoking a cigarette and he goes, John, you ruined my whole movie.
Oh, man.
What a guy. I'm sitting there, we're staying at some grand hotel in New Orleans, and I'd come in the morning dressed like a bum, and the doorman would stop me. I'm like, hey, bud, I'm with the movie. I have twigs in my hair. Oh, God.
It's that weird hybrid of his Hong Kong stuff with his American stuff. So is he like, yeah, I need mirrors, I need this, make sure there's doves in here?
Yeah, he's very particular about everything that you see. Everything that you see. And I didn't get to make another movie with him, so I don't know if he had that, if there was still someone he trusted to work with the actors. And it was a big thing from the actors, too, because they weren't used to getting direction from someone else. But once they saw and heard John say to me, go tell him this. And Lance Hendrickson and Arnold Vosloo, the two bad guys, great. I love Arnold. I love Lance too. They're just great guys. And they really ate that up. They were great.
I know you also wrote some video games in there as well. How was that experience for you?
Yeah, boy, and this was really crazy. It was during the period where Sony was spending like $50 million on this multi-path video game called Johnny Mnemonic. And it was going to be the whole new dawn of cinema or something. And I had written a bunch of graphic novels for Dark Horse. And I was at a meeting in Milwaukee with Mike Richardson and I met this guy, Tsunami Media. And got to know him pretty well. And they had this evil genius named Dave Otsby, who had perfected the engine that could multipath the video, which is something that Sony never cracked. So they'd have to wastefully shoot all these shots and everything over again, and it was hinky and it wouldn't connect. But once I was satisfied, they had the engine working. Yeah, I still don't know how I did it, but I drew out these scripts that were like 500 or 600 pages, and the engine could, which I helped Dave design. The joke was he was Werner von Braun, and he made the rockets, and I made the fuel. So the script would go in there, and we did a couple of these scripts. One was called Flash Traffic. I had a nuclear thriller in the bag, and I just said, okay, we made it so you make all these decisions and see your own action movie. Then we did another one called Silent Steel, which was, you want to make a movie with one set, you put it on a submarine, right? So we went to Charleston, where the USS Clamagore is a museum ship submarine. So it looks like a submarine because it was. And interestingly, we named the submarine in the movie was USS Idaho, which didn't exist, but the USS Idaho just got commissioned like this week. So now there is a USS Idaho. But anyway, those were fun to do. And I had cooled off in my special operations career. But while we were working at Tsunami, we got a call from the FBI. And we thought it was a joke. Guy called from the FBI Office of WMD Countermeasures. And they wanted a training video. They wanted to do a training thing of upcoming, how an anti-counterterrorism operation works. From the legal side, from the tactical side, from the investigative side. And I said, yeah, okay, what's your phone number? I'm going to call you back. I call him back. It's FBI. Okay. So we wound up making one of those for them. And we wound up making, I don't know, we made one of those for every government agency that ends in a vowel. And that kind of pulled me away from Hollywood a little bit because we tried to take that company public. That didn't work, but did a lot of work. Then and kept writing, was crazy.
Tell me how Barb Wire comes to be.
Oh my God. So here's the way I describe Barb Wire. I want you to imagine something that you would not do. Okay. Draw the line. I'm going to pile up money until you tell me you might think about it. Okay. So I got a call and they said, hey, Mike Richardson invented the character in the graphic novel and it got turned into a movie. They've got a script. And Mike calls me up and says, look, this thing needs a page one. What can you do? And I said, look, I'm just not interested in it. No, I don't want to do it. No, thanks. I said, no. I said, no. I said, no. Then I said, what? How much? Are you kidding me? So I try to rewrite it. And I come up with some new stuff and I get it back and they say, no, we need the kumquat factory. We've already built the set. No, we need this. No. So the whole thing just started to wobble and fall apart. And everybody knew it was a train wreck. Everybody. And so it goes in and I am thinking, okay, I'm going to take my name off. And I called the Writers Guild, and Eileen Chaikin was the previous writer. And two people can't take their names off a project. Nice thing in the guild. So I got stuck holding the bag. Yeah. I think I saw about 20 minutes of the movie, and I was just like, I didn't write that. I didn't say that. Lines, what do you think this is? Anyway. So there's the lesson, man. Everyone has their price, and be careful if you ever take the price.
I've got another one that you're associated with, which is The Jackal. Did you do a draft of that?
No, I did the whole thing. That was absolutely not. Yeah. There's another one that sort of Jim Jacks calls me up and says, "Hey, look, we're going to remake The Jackal. I want you to do it." And I said, "No, I don't." I said, "No, I don't think so." I said, "Why touch that? Right? You're going to get flack for redoing that." And he threatened to sue me if I didn't do it. Yeah, it was at the end of my 3-picture deal, and that was actually the 4th script in the deal. Anyway, it had this blinking green light from the very beginning. So I thought, okay, look, you can write 100 scripts and they'll never go. So if you got one that really looks like it's going to go, all right. I did it and they loved it. And I said, let's call it something else. Let's just call it anything except The Jackal. Yeah, absolutely. But they stuck with it. That was the studio's decision. And it wasn't the worst thing I've ever written. So it did okay, but it didn't deserve to compare itself to Foresight. It isn't in that league. It really isn't. And if you watch Day of the Jackal and you just make the scene cards, you could see it's pretty much exactly the same. It's almost exactly the same. That structure was so strong. And I wondered about that, but they had the rights. And here's a little bit of karma. So Universal had the rights, so they ripped off Foresight and remade it, right? And then a couple of years ago, Universal ripped me off for Hard Target and remade it without my permission. Yeah, life sucked. Then you die.
Which one was that? I don't even remember a remake.
Oh, it was just, they made it for $1 million in Thailand. It was preposterous. And so I ripped out the old contract and I'm looking and there's this weasel language in the sequel because it was a spec script. But yeah, they will totally rip you off. Absolutely. They have no qualms about it. I used to go to screenwriting conferences and occasionally teach, but it was like, why would you talk nice, young, bright-faced people into this horrifying business, right? Where your dreams will be crushed and you're going to have to sit and watch them. And sometimes you're going to have to help crush it. Oh,
because you wrote the original Virus graphic novel, correct?
Yeah.
So how was it adapting yourself for the screen?
It really wasn't hard, but the problem is, I'm not saying every time I do a script, I have to come with it. For the final draft I put in, it just missed the mark. Yeah. John Bruno's nice guy, but there were lines in there. They're up on the bridge and the monster's somewhere in the ship. And somebody says to somebody else, if you go down there, watch your back. Do you think I sat here at this keyboard going, what should they say? Oh, watch your back. It's like one of those actor lines you get on the day and they go, I feel like saying, watch your back. Why don't we do what's in the script? Again, that's the whole trick, right? You're a screenwriter, you just stay in your lane. You just write it as the best you can and turn it in and go to the next project. And while they were making that, I was somewhere else making something else. And they had a lot of trouble with the mechanical monsters. They wouldn't work. And it was on the cusp of the really good digital age. So these things were all practical. So he had a real, if they had made it 5 years later, wow, might have really worked.
I made the mistake of watching that and Red Planet back to back, where you have the mechanical monsters in both of those. And yeah, the practical versus the computer generated effect, it's stark.
Here's the interesting thing about Red Planet. I wrote a screenplay called Alone. And stop me if you've seen this movie. The orbiter gets hit. One guy crashes on the surface. One. Does this sound like The Martian? One guy.
You don't know how many times I was making comparisons the other day. Yes.
One guy. Actually, someone is with him and he dies. But in 5 minutes, that guy's dead. And Carrie Ann Moss is in the orbiter, and she can only talk to him when she goes right overhead. So he looks up at night and sees the star going overhead. And they're both, wait for it, alone. Okay. They paid $1 million for the screenplay. They absolutely loved it. I was going to direct it for about 90 seconds. Then they call me up and they say, hey, we got a new director. We really want him in. Just make the movie. I don't care. So the guy they got to direct it had one credit. He directed the Budweiser frog in the speedboat video. One credit. Okay. And they loved the screenplay called Alone so much, they added 6 more people. And his brother-in-law rewrote it. I don't know who. I share credit. I don't even know who. No idea. But they had lines like Boomer, the space janitor, all this other shit. They had, of course, the autonomous Mars mapping and exploration unit, Amy, had to be programmed by the Green Beret. That's why it went nuts. Okay, I just had it that it landed on its freaking head, woke up, and just wasn't quite there anymore. Not programmed by Green Berets. Also, I didn't really want to start with 2050 and the Earth is destroyed by global war. Just cut me a break. Just honest to God. What's always amazing to me is if I handed that in at the beginning, it never would have been there. Never would have been there. Another interesting thing. So that thing went out on the weekend read. It went to Warner Brothers, Universal, four other places. First thing Monday morning, we get a hard no from Disney. Okay. We got a hard yes 40 minutes later from Warner Brothers, right? Next day's Variety. Robert De Palma to make Mars epic. I'm like, wow. You read my screenplay, you hit the Rolodex, and you called De Palma. But again, what do you do? Did I complain? No. So then they were in a race, which I actually thought was good. Because if there's a race, they'll go head to head. But that original screenplay was The Martian, and it would have been as good. How could it not be? Because it hit all the same beats. It hit all the same beats. Not that I'm a great writer. That's just a better story than 7 guys pissed off at each other. You know,
I kept thinking, why is Val Kilmer? He keeps throwing things like he's a baseball player. And I'm like, was there a line I missed that he was a baseball player? Just weird things like that.
Well, they got to Australia, and apparently I've been on a couple of movies where the cast turns on each other. Yes. I was an executive producer, for that thing. But again, you get a director who was his first feature gig. By the way, it was his last. They didn't want me anywhere near it. They paid me to go to Australia, help make that movie. They just sent me the money. I'm like, okay. I can walk to the mailbox every month, but I think that was really the most disappointing, because there were moments in that movie that were really good, and I hate to say it, they were all mine. When he's sitting there and Amy just drops down in front of him, and those other blasting off in the Russian spacecraft, and all the other sort of, you never know what people are going to rewrite. And it's so strange because sometimes it gets better, but most of the time it doesn't. Stuff comes and goes, and screenwriting, man, don't do it.
What was your version of the Green Hornet?
You know what? I don't even think anyone read my version. It was more like Frank Miller. If Frank Miller did the Green Hornet, it was really film noir in this really dystopian city. It was basically New York, but it had been taken over by the federal government because it was so crazy. And it stayed pretty true to the story. Yeah, Cato and the Green Hornet, but I just got page 1 on it. It's the ones you make and the ones you don't make, and probably one of the best ones I ever wrote was that thing about Hemingway, and it's just getting optioned, but nobody ever pulled it off. Jimmy Buffett was going to do it once, and he'd been down there with Bob Nixon was the guy who was producing it, great guy, and they had been to the finca, to the Hemingway farm in Florida, and they said, "How did you guys get there?" And we didn't. We just looked at all the pictures and read tons of Hemingway biographies, but they'd both been there and they just dug it and got to have lunch with Jimmy Buffett. So that was cool.
Do you have cheeseburgers?
No, I can't remember what was cool thing about Jimmy Buffett. We're sitting in this outdoor cafe in Santa Monica waiting for him, and he just walks down the street and nobody recognizes him. And I'm like, man, that's the way you want to be. You want to be Jimmy Buffett, but nobody even turned around. I was like awestruck. Oh man, Jimmy Buffett. Nice guy too. He was a nice guy.
How was that transition for you moving from screenplays to novels?
You write a novel and you go to the publisher and everybody calls you Mr. Farr. And can I get you some coffee or some tea? I can go out and start. You're a screenwriter. They make you wait 45 minutes in the outer office when you can see the son of a bitch is right there with his feet on the desk. My first novel was Killing Che, and I'd written it as a screenplay first. And then, of course, the Soderbergh Che movie was going on, and I'd actually finished the screenplay about a year before, but that he had the subject matter. And even though mine was about the death of Guevara, he goes to Bolivia, and it's about the whatever it was, 300 days he was in Bolivia. But he had it. It's funny, you wind up, I talked about my Uncle Don, who would write these novels, and they'd get terrific reviews in the New York Review of Books, but they didn't sell. And Killing Che was the same way. I got terrific reviews, but Eric just started writing books. You just get treated better writing books. They don't make nearly as much money. Not at all. Labors of love, really, but it's very satisfying. It's a lot harder for me to write a novel than a screenplay. Because a screenplay, you're just looking at, you have to see everything. In a good novel, you've got to think everything, right? Somebody's got to, unless you're Dashiell Hammett and the audience is locked on your character, you have to think for the audience. And of course, screenplay is 110 pages, a novel is 500 pages. So I think I've got another novel in me. I don't know what it's going to be, but I think I've got one.
What else are you working on these days?
This is really strange. I got called up to do a Twitter space. Let's see. As just an aside, during the Syrian civil war, I started to put up maps of the way things were going. And I got a following doing that. And then I couldn't stop because I get people from Kurdistan writing to me saying, is this village safe or not? So I just kept doing it. And I had just, I don't know, it was a couple thousand followers on Twitter, very niche. But then I started mapping what's going on in Ukraine. And it's part of what you do as a SEAL. You go places and make maps. This outfit called the Maria Report, the first day of the Russian invasion, they started, this sounds insane, but they pulled it off. They've been broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with news and information on the war in Ukraine. And we've got co-hosts in Estonia, Britain, Australia, the United States. It's almost like CNN. It just goes 24 hours a day. And people listen from Ukraine. We get guests from the front line. And they called me up and asked me to do an interview, and I did. And my association grew. And now I do a show a couple times a week for them on the Twitter space at Maria Report. I do a show called Bullet Points. We go through what happened that day in the war and take questions from the audience, which is great. But they've had just really amazing guests come on. General Hodges, who was the commander of the U.S. Army in Europe, ambassadors, members of Parliament in the EU. We get Ukrainian soldiers right from the front line. And to think this is all like a bunch of old hippies pulled this together with a bunch of volunteers. And we've raised millions of dollars for Ukraine. We get a military outfit will tell us they need thermal drones. They need a truck. One unit asks for 32 pairs of pants. And we collect the money. We're a 501c3, and man, we deliver. Every time I think I want to throttle back, everyone in that outfit does more than I do. So I can't quit. They're great people too.
Yeah. I do a show about Barney Miller, and one of the things about Barney Miller is police officers will say this is as close to real police work as we've seen. Like the waiting around, what the atmosphere is like in the bullpen. For you, being part of the military for so long, what are some of the better portrayals of the military that you've ever seen?
Wow. I like Platoon. I have a friend in the SEALs, and he warned me, he goes, hey, I just saw Saving Private Ryan. We're all PTSD guys. And he goes, don't watch the beginning. So I was like, okay, great. But I watched the end. And I tell you, look, I spent a year on the streets of Beirut. So when they were doing that city fighting, the only thing that was missing was the smell. And it was just, I just got mud sucked because I thought, okay, I won't watch the beginning. And there's that one scene in there where they're fighting the half track. You remember they're in a wheat field and they shoot it out and it seems like everything's over. And they're all standing there and then 3 more Germans stand up. And that's exactly what it's like. You think it's over. It would have been over for Bruce Willis, but it's not over. And that was this one moment that absolutely jagged me. It was like, wow. And then that combat in the city with the broken pipes, the dripping. Saving Private Ryan was one of those first movies where they just started to get the sound effects right. And I think another one was Black Hawk Down. I watched that with a helicopter pilot friend of mine. And in the middle of the movie, I looked over and we were both like down in our seats. Because that sound when they go, where the bullet goes over your head and goes, it makes this kind of noise. And that's the bullet breaking the sound barrier. And you can only hear it for about this. So you hear that and the bullets come within about 18 inches of your head. So, but there have been some other ones and that's really, I really get it. It's great. But I'm actually, you scratch any seal and we're all peaceniks. We really are. If you're going to have a war, send us in and we'll get it over with for you. We're like the plumber. You don't want this to go on forever, right? You want it over? Send us and then we'll be over.
Where's the best place for people to keep up with you and your work?
It's at Chuck Pfarrer on Twitter. And this is mostly, I'm just covering the war in Ukraine. I'll probably start working on another novel, I think. I kicked around a couple of series. I've got a couple of series ideas, but we'll see. But it's been great talking to you, man.
Yeah, it's been great talking with you. Thank you so much for your time. This has been terrific.
Oh, my pleasure. It took us a while to get it, but man, thank you. Anytime.